Hello everyone and welcome to our seminar series From Single to Mingle in just under 30 seconds. The how-tos in deciphering the dating code. For many of the viewers today and to our live audience, you probably came across my TV show, The Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan, a TV program that provides opportunities for local authors in the DMV area to share their journey to getting published and on their way to becoming bestsellers. Now, we all have a different definition to what happiness means to all of us, individually speaking. And to many singles out there, their happiness is to find their true soulmate. Hence, one of the many reasons why we decided to create these seminars about dating and relationships. So here we are today, giving you the tools to find your soulmate. Now, our past seminar topic were learning to better communicate with your date or mate. The second seminar was covering the topic of the do's and don'ts about online and offline dating. The third seminar was discussing the challenges in meeting new people. And the fourth one today will be about the psychology of dating. My name is Dr. Dan Amzalag, and I'm your host for today's seminar. I have a doctorate degree in organizational leadership and communication with a minor in quantum physics. I'm also a practicing therapist covering issues such as self-esteem, weight and anger management, and also do marital and relationship counseling. I do individual and group therapy as well. Now, for more information, you can contact me on the number below. Now, the program today will be a 1-hour interactive seminar where our audience can also ask questions to our guest panelists as we're having discussion. I guess this makes our conversation a little bit more engaging. So welcome all to the seminar series From Single to Mingle in just under 30 seconds. So now I'm gonna let our guest panelists introduce themselves to our viewers and our audience. I think they know themselves better than anyone else. I'm gonna start with Dr. Devon King.
I'm a licensed psychologist. I have a private practice in Bethesda. I see adolescents through adults. I see individuals and couples and families in therapy. I tend to work with a wide breadth of people coming in from everything from difficulty with transitions to more severe mental illness. Relationships are a common topic that come up in therapy regardless of the presenting problem. Often people are struggling in their relationships and want to figure out how to be happier in their relationships.
Excellent. Leora Hoffman, your turn.
Thank you for having me. I'm a matchmaker. I've been in business for the last 27 years in the Washington, D.C. area and also serving Baltimore as well. But I also conduct what I call executive searches for people who are open to long-distance situations as well. It's my job to get people together for meaningful long-term relationships as opposed to dates. And I have been actively matching people in this community and have had over 74 marriages, one recent engagement, and hundreds of relationships over the years that I've been doing this. I'm also a practicing attorney, and I practiced law for over 20 years in this area at a time when I was juggling both my legal career and the business. I currently focus on the business exclusively, and I specialize in baby boomers, the 50-plus demographic. I find that that's a demographic that's very open, very stable, mature, and very conscious of what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And so that's really my area of expertise.
And in your attorney business or legal business, do you do family attorney?
I did practice in that area of the law, which is why I really see myself as an advocate for my clients in the matchmaking business. My goal is to find them a meaningful relationship and to help them find love.
Well, we all.
Yes, right.
Well, Devon, I'm going to start with you when it comes to a question about relationship. Now, I know that in the dating scene, a lot of people get really frustrated about meeting their significant other because, especially online. Now, based on the past relationship, how does it affect people looking for new relationships?
So we tend to repeat patterns, and we tend to repeat patterns both from early childhood, so the patterns that we had with our parents generally or caregivers, and then it sort of feeds on itself, and then we engage in romantic relationships that sometimes mimic our past relationships, or what Freud referred to as the repetition compulsion. So the idea that if there are snags early on, we try to work them out as we grow up. And so often what I see are people who can identify patterns in their dating history that go back to their early relationships, and they keep making sort of the same mistakes over and over again. So they date the same kind of person, and the relationship often ends the same way or similarly. And in my experience, if we can sort of figure out and untangle that, it allows people to make different choices and sort of go on a different path and recognize where they get stuck, so that they can start thinking about the choices that they make rather than sort of being on an automatic pilot and making the same choices over and over again.
And that happens a lot with toxic relationships.
Absolutely. Yes, so it's not such a problem when you've had healthy relationship patterns and you continue to engage in those. But part of what happens, and when you say it out loud, it sounds like, why would I do that? But part of what tends to happen is we do the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different outcome.
Definition of insanity.
Exactly. But we all do it. Because to give sort of a general example, if we didn't get enough attention or love, to be cliche, from a father, we often seek out people who don't have, because we don't feel special enough to get it, right? Like that's the message, that I'm not special enough for this person who's supposed to love me the most in the world to love me enough. And so then we seek out people who are incapable of loving us to try to get people who can't do it to do it, which then just reinforces the idea that we're not lovable. And often it's not even conscious. So that's where you get into, excuse me, the toxic relationships often. And they're all different variations of that pattern.
Interesting. Now, Leora, I know there's a lot of people that talk about chemistry, in relationship. Now, define the word chemistry. I know this is not the typical, subject that we learn in high school, Chemistry 101. But in relationship, how does the chemistry come into effect?
The way that people experience it is there's a spark between them. They meet, there's an attraction. It's something that is very visceral. It's something that no one can really predict, and I believe it's in nature. It's really a wild card in terms of my matching couples, because while I can get people together who have common goals, common values, which are also very major factors, the chemistry piece is something that can only be determined when they're face to face. And in my experience cannot be determined from a photo, which is a common online mistake, where people look at a photo, feel attracted to that person, but then meet them in person and there's nothing there. So I believe it really is a function of a dynamic between two people. And I've seen it emerge in a number of different ways. Sometimes you have people who meet and right away it clicks and it's clear. That's positive chemistry. Then there's negative chemistry, where people meet and it's clear within seconds, like, while I might think you're a nice person, that it's not happening between us. But then there's the neutral situation. And I have had many couples in my practice where it wasn't clear from the beginning, where they met, liked each other, and it had to grow a little bit, or one person liked the other person wasn't sure. And in that situation, I always encourage people to spend more time together.
So that now that we're having all those dating apps like Tinder and all those like for instant gratification, so that whole concept of wanting to spend more time with that person, then that doesn't work anymore, because for them they just swipe. No, I don't like this person. Swipe, swipe, swipe. So how is now dating in the 21st century will have impact on what you just mentioned regarding people spending time and trying to get to learn about the other person before they make a decision if they want to go and spend the rest of their life with?
It's a difficult challenge. People have a tendency to want instant results. And part of my intake process is really explaining to people that relationships are a process, and that often it takes repeated exposure to a person before you can really understand who you're dealing with, and before people are comfortable enough to even let that chemistry emerge. Because part of it is really a comfort zone with somebody, not only an attraction to them. And I think it takes both components to really make it work.
So what will come first? It has to be the physical attraction before the emotional one.
Yes, I mean, sometimes it happens simultaneously, and that's great, and I have hit those home runs out of the starting gate. But I think sometimes people make the mistake of feeling like if that bolt of lightning doesn't happen right then and there, let's move on to the next person. And that is really unfortunate because they can be missing a lot of opportunities.
Very interesting. Now, Dr. Devon, you were mentioning something about self-esteem, when it comes to previous relationships. Now, how does that impact someone when it comes to, okay, well, I've already gone through a divorce or a failed relationship, and they usually accuse themselves most of the time to say, I'm at fault, or others will just point fingers at everybody else. Now, how does self-esteem will be able to have an impact on how they'll be able to meet someone new?
In lots of ways. I mean, I think that we as humans have a habit of blaming ourselves for things that happen that hurt because it gives us the illusion of control, right? Like if I did it, then I can be better and I can fix it. The problem is if you're not actually the problem, then you just, again, keep reinforcing because you can't fix it. So, if you have not been successful, it can be very disillusioning. You're probably hurting. It's hard to put yourself out there. You tend to, when you're not feeling good, become very self-focused and forget about the other person. And one of the things that I often encounter in my practice is people getting very preoccupied with not wanting to be vulnerable, not wanting to get hurt. And if there is sort of the slightest tinge feeling of this person that I like isn't 100% into me, or I'm not, or even I'm not so sure, there's a propensity to shut down. And what I often have to remind my patients is you're not the only neurotic person. That the person that you are dating, if they actually like you, they're probably anxious too. And they're probably looking to you for validation and reinforcement. And when you shut down because you're anxious, what they are getting is that you don't like them. You have just told this person that you're interested in that you're not interested in them. So maybe they're not calling you because they think you don't like them, not because they don't like you.
Oh, wow, okay.
So that's one piece. Another piece is inevitably, I tell my patients this, if you cannot tolerate getting rejected and getting hurt, you should not be dating. Because the reality is, most of the time, unfortunately, it doesn't work out. And you need to get back, out there and try to find somebody who is a good fit for you and hold on to the idea that your goal is to find somebody who is a good fit for you, not just somebody. And if something doesn't work out, then you need to go find somebody who can treat you and appreciate you for who you are. You need to not hang on to people just to have somebody. And so, there's a piece of, if every time you are rejected, again, this goes back to what I was saying before, it's sort of a reminder of not being good enough or an indicator of not being good enough, then it's going to be way too painful and disillusioning to date. Because oftentimes it just doesn't work. And maybe, hopefully, we do it because it does work. And for a lot of people, ultimately, it does work. But you need to be sturdy enough to tolerate that.
Interesting. Now, you were mentioning, Leora, that you focus a lot on the baby boomers. Would you say it's because people who are 50 and above they already know what they want, instead of like being flaky and not sure or indecisive? Do you feel that the 50 plus are already set on their ways, and when they're looking for a significant other, they already have a list of items to what they're looking in the significant other? Is it the reason why it's easier to deal with this demographic?
It's easier because people have had their own journeys. They've learned, they've matured, and they realize that perfection really doesn't exist out there, especially in relationships. And it's a question of finding someone with actually, as Dr. Devon said, kind of matching neuroses, where you laugh at the same things, where you get each other. And I find that this population really is more realistic, and also they're more stable in their lives. Often they've been married and divorced, they've learned from those experiences, they know what they're looking for, and they often have children who have been raised and launched, and so have more flexibility and freedom. So it's a very exciting new stage in their lives, and they really want to share it with the right person.
Okay, so it's easier for you to recommend them or to match them up with someone within their own age group. I mean, I personally do a lot of, speed dating events, and when I put an age group of women and an age group of men, usually the men who are like 50 or 60, they want to go with someone who's 25. So how,
Yes,
don't they go for younger? I mean, so how this demographic can actually decide what's good for them in terms of the age group of what kind of women they're looking for?
Well, let me say that, we do have a bias in our culture of men dating younger women, and I'm really a proponent of being open-minded in terms of that. And I've often introduced men to even women who are a few years older than them. Okay. It's really about the person. And if they find that other person attractive, again, some people have a pattern where they only want to date younger. My purpose in really having the kind of practice I have is to get to know the people, to really understand what's motivating them psychologically and emotionally, and really offering them sometimes a different kind of a choice from what they've opted for before.
Now, Dr. Devon, what kind of red flag would you kind of like advise your patient to look for? I mean, I know we all have different red flags. We all have different, when it comes to wanting to meet a significant other and going on dates. What would you recommend them to pay attention the most on before making a decision if they yes or no, they're going to continue with them?
In terms of about the person
Yes.
that they're, well, I mean, I think that, I guess the way that I tend to think and the way that I try to think about things with my patients is what is drawing you to this person. Because sometimes it's healthy things that draw us to people, and sometimes it's things that aren't so healthy. And often what is familiar and uncomfortable is preferable to the unknown. Okay. So, it's really understanding what is drawing you to this person, and how are you being treated, the quality of the interaction. I see a lot of people get preoccupied with needing to be wanted and forget to think about whether or not they actually like the person that they're wanting to like them. I can't tell you the number of times in my office I will say, but do you like him? Because it gets lost. People don't even think about whether they actually want to spend time with the person. They're just so preoccupied with not getting rejected. Okay. So, obviously there are obvious red flags, like if someone is abusive or nasty or, but yes, the more subtle pieces are, what is this you are embarking on? What do you know? What don't you know? If you're wanting to run away, why are you wanting to run away? If you're running to run towards, why is that? And understanding, because it's when you have some insight into what you're doing, it gives you the opportunity to make choices.
Interesting. Now, Leora, when it comes to new patient, new clients coming to you and basically asking you, look, I don't know how to date. I don't know how to approach people. I don't know how to interact with people. What would be the first suggestion that you give them? I mean, do you try to go far back into the past to determine exactly how did they lost that communication pattern with their dealing with other people, or what question do you ask when it comes to knowing what is their deep problem?
Well, let me say I'm not a therapist, but I am a relationship coach. And so I get a background, a history. I start with a family background. I want to know about the dynamics in the family. I want to know if somebody's parents had a happy marriage, for example. I want to know how that affected them. I also want to know their relationship history. What's happened, what have been the issues in past relationships. If they've been married, what led to the divorce. If they haven't been married, is it a commitment issue perhaps that they're struggling with? And so some people do come to me not necessarily to meet other people, but to figure out how they can be successful in dating. And so I work with them to really give them a perspective and a comfort zone before I actually send them out on dates. So it depends really what they're looking for when they come to me. The variety of my practice and my clients is really refreshing and interesting. People come to the table with all kinds of experiences and a range, and it's really up to me to figure out what issues, what they're to avoid, what their hot buttons are, and really how to increase the odds in their favor that the next interaction is going to be a different and more positive one.
Interesting. I'd like to hear about the audience here, just to be able to have them to interact, like any experience that they want to share with our two experts here, and anything that has to do with interacting with people online or offline. What has been the biggest challenge? Anyone? Yes, if anyone can just come to the microphone, that will be great.
Yeah, my biggest challenge is basically I get contact by these ladies, and we interact through emails for a certain period of time, and they tend to fall. You know, they feel good how they talk to me online, but I'm not certain they wanna meet up or meet in person, because that's the key factor, and I'm not sure how. They say, well, they just give me some time, you know, and I don't want to rush them either, because I want them to make them feel comfortable. And actually, to be honest with you, I had 3 ladies right now that I'm in online conversing with them.
And the Casanova, you are.
And they say, and then we exchange photos, and you know, they're saying you're very handsome and everything, but and they're very attractive too, but it comes down to really meeting the person live, and then that's when the real thing is going to be, you know. So that's my issue, how to not to be too forceful, but there's got to be a cutoff point at some point. I don't want to waste their time, and I don't want to waste my time. And like you said, you know, you have to find somebody that's, you know, compatible with you, and but you're going to do that only by face to face.
So what do people chicken out then when it comes to dating?
Well, I think, so some people chicken out, and some people get enough just by the online interaction, and they're actually terrified of having a real relationship, and that's a dilemma. And I think that you present a good point in terms of wanting to be sensitive to not being pushy. On the other hand, you don't want to invest all sorts of time in somebody to have them either never want to meet you, or when you meet them, have it fall flat. So I think.
Yeah, especially if I'm short, you know, and they might say, "Oh, this guy's short." Right.
So then part of it is also anxiety on your part of being, investing all this energy and then getting rejected, you know, and that's not a nice place to be. You know, generally I lead with sort of honesty over games, and you know that if you are engaging with someone online, to be direct about, I don't want to be pushy. On the other hand, you know, in my experience, you never know what it's going to be like in person, and maybe we should just meet for some coffee and see what it feels like. And if they push back, then it's up to you to decide whether or not you want to pursue it or move on. But you know, to be honest about, to be sensitive to the fact that you don't want to be pushy, the person you're talking to will hopefully be able to hear it. And as I tell my patients, if they can't, that's data, right? Like, you're also trying to, you know, and if the person that is on the other end can't hear you or can't understand, that's important information for you to have and for you to think about if you want to pursue them anymore.
Now, is there a time frame that I should give these people, or so I can move on and just tell them, you know, we've been online for, 3 weeks or 4 weeks. I don't know. I don't know if there's a time frame.
I agree with Dr. Devon. I think it's important to cut to the chase. And really, I don't recommend that people spend more than a few email exchanges before they actually meet face to face to know if there's even potential. Otherwise, you're wasting your time, you're wasting the other person's time. You're not looking for a pen pal necessarily. And that's why it's important to really know who you're dealing with. And for example, as you mentioned, one of your barriers is height. Well, it's important to put it out there to let them know, I'm such and such height. If you're not comfortable with that, let's both agree and move on. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's better than having a false sense of complacency that it almost feels like you're in a relationship when you haven't even met the person. And that's really not a basis to even think of, it's not reality based. It's just projection and fantasy at that point.
That's what
But I think that if, let's say, you just mentioned about a height issue, but isn't your height listed in your profile? So if they continue talking to you, that means they are aware already of your height. So
Right.
physical appearance would not really be such a big factor for them not to meet you.
Yeah, that is true, but you still gotta meet the person, face to face, and then maybe that'll hit them maybe somehow. I don't know.
So after 4 weeks, you don't hear from them anymore.
Say that again?
After 4 weeks of conversing through email, they disappear, they go missing in action.
No. I'm just saying that I just been talking to these 3 ladies online, and maybe it's a couple of weeks, but I'm just saying that I don't know how long it's gonna. It's going well, and I just wanna, have a time frame. I don't wanna
I think
keep
it's-
dragging this on.
as Leora was saying, I think it's important to be honest with yourself too about what it is you're looking for and to be honest with them. Sometimes what happens is if there's such a pull for it to work out, you end up holding on to something that isn't enough. So that there can be anxiety that if you say, hey, I really don't want a pen pal, I'd like to meet you, I don't want to be pushy, let's go to a public place, that then they'll say no. And sometimes we don't realize it, but it feels better to hold on to the fantasy that they could say yes rather than setting a limit and having them say no. And that's when you need to step back and say, where do I want to invest my energy? And if they're going to say no, if it's always going to be fantasy, is that the world you want to be in?
Right. No, I do not.
So
Very good point, Dr. Devon. Thank
Got
you
it.
so much for the
Thank
question.
you. Thank you very much.
You had a question in the back there, please?
Hi.
In my professional life, I always believed that if a headhunter calls, even though you're happy with your job, it's still a good idea to go for an interview, just to keep your interviewing skills fresh. Do you think it works the same in dating? Is it a point of trying to learn and to see how you can do the dating interviews versus, professional?
Absolutely. I think practice makes perfect. And there are a lot of people who are just out of a divorce, for example, haven't dated in 20 years.
Right.
That's a common situation I deal with. I encourage people to go out and just practice, even if when they meet, initially they don't feel that that's somebody that they could have chemistry with. It's really helpful to just have that give and take, the conversation, to really keep those skills honed. Because for the right person, you'll be more confident and more practiced. And it's really up to you how much of your time you want to invest in developing those skills.
Great, thank you.
So you would recommend basically like on online dating, it's like throwing 5,000 darts until one of them will hit the target.
Well,
So
it
it's-
depends on the person. If, again, where are they in their singlehood? If they're just out of a relationship or a marriage, then it's in their interest to get out and meet a number of people and see who they react well to, who they click with, really practice those skills. If somebody's been out there for years and really wants to focus on a long-term relationship, which is really the majority of my clientele, I tell them to really try and salvage, and maintain their energy level by not diffusing it too much and not going out there and meeting dozens of people. Because there are only so many hours in the day and there are only so many dates that one can go on without getting discouraged over time. So it's walking that balance between practicing the skills but not overdoing it so that you really feel depressed and discouraged if it doesn't work out.
Interesting. Anyone has any say in that or any experiences with online dating that didn't come up to what they expected or, yes, go ahead.
So I recently had an issue with a cyber stalker.
Oh my.
And so, but I find a pattern that you had talked about where the guys that I connect with, they like to live through me because I'm the person who's the doer, the person who goes and travels, the person who tries new cuisines or new things. And I find that online that the guys that, they're like, oh, tell me every detail. I mean, they're texting me, they're emailing me. I mean, constantly, like I said, how do you avoid a pitfall like that? Where?
Again, it depends what you are trying to get out of it. If you feel that it's fun and that kind of interaction is helpful to you in some way, then it's no problem. But if you feel like you're not really achieving the goal that you're looking for, if the goal is to meet one special person that you can start dating and develop a relationship with, then it's not necessarily a good use of your time and energy. So it really depends what you want to get out of it.
So, like, I guess, is there a certain personality type of a person who's more should not do an online, but should do like a speed dating or a service like you have? I mean, is there like a certain person, or like does that person have to be more outgoing in order to do that, and then maybe a shy person do the online? I mean, I don't know.
No, not necessarily. Again, I think it depends on what your goals are. If your goals are to meet a lot of people and experiment with different personality types, then the online dating is the perfect opportunity to do that because the numbers are limitless. If, however, you might be ready for something a little more substantive, a real relationship and a one-on-one exclusive relationship, it might really be in your best interest to really be a little more discerning when you're screening out possibilities and just zero in on some potential prospects who you think have the qualities you're looking for rather than just anyone who will listen. And it sounds like you have had a lot of interest because you have probably a very interesting profile, an interesting background, and that's great. But is it serving you is the question.
So do you feel that you're wasting your time with those people because you have to kind of give them the, I would say, the excitement that they cannot find in their own life?
Yeah, I definitely would say that after a while it's all one-sided. Mm-hmm. It's very much that I'm feeding them the storyline, that I'm a character in a book almost.
Yes.
So yeah, that's where it's lost its fun at that point.
Well, it sounds like part of what ends up happening is you said you're a character in a book, you're no longer a person.
Yeah.
So you've become sort of this object for them to live through, this fantasy.
Like a fiction book.
Yeah, and it's not you anymore. And so I guess I would say if it doesn't feel good, if it doesn't feel right, then you
And
you
do
can,
something else.
Yeah,
Cut ties, yeah.
that you can end it. If anything doesn't feel right, it's important to be able to say, this doesn't feel good to me anymore. Go do this with somebody else.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? No? Now, Dr. Devon, what would you say in your practice would be the most common factors when it comes to, especially if they interact with you and they discuss about their issue? What would you say that's going to be a successful relationship, or that's going to be a failure? When it comes to, okay, well, I'm just dated someone and this is what's going on between us, would you be able to tell them, well, you're doing something wrong here, or this is right, or this is, how would you be able to kind of not, or break the ice without making them feel like crap?
I guess, you mean in terms of trying to understand with the person I'm working with what's happening in their relationship?
Yes, that's correct. The dynamic between them and their significant other. I mean, if you start going out with someone, they've been going out for a couple months, but then you already start having issues, which is a bit too early in the relationship. How or what do you recommend to them? I mean, I know there's a various amount of different issues that could happen, but how could you say, no, this is something that's going to fail, or there's potential for success? How do you differentiate between both?
I think, I tend to be less directive just in terms of the way that I work. So I get curious rather than judgmental.
Okay.
So, if someone is telling me they're not happy and they're continuing to, in a relationship that they're telling me they're not happy in, I start to think with them about why that is. What is the draw? What do they like about the person? What don't they like? What are they getting from the relationship, even if it's not something that feels good to them? If something seems to be going well, the same thing, curiosity. What is this about? Trying to understand them, trying to understand their partner. I think sort of one of the things that I have found, like when I do couples therapy or when there's a longer relationship that is under duress, I am of the belief that if both parties are really invested in making it work, which can be really hard work and very painful, most people who are invested in that kind of way can grow enough to make it work. But there we're talking about something where there's history and, you know, a lot of substance. But in terms of dating, really just, if something feels good, what's that about? If something doesn't feel good, you know, what is that about? I don't have, gosh, if I, you know, had sort of the key to knowing, you know, the crystal ball, that would be wonderful. But I don't. So you know, my goal is to get to know my patient and for them to get to know themselves too. And then they can go make the decisions on their own and they don't have to come ask me what to do, right? They can have a sense when they're out there.
So those who are like serial daters, okay, they're doing a disservice to themselves, or they're actually the smartest people out there because they're trying to meet as many people as possible to see exactly what they like or what they don't like. But those who are serial dater, they could be seen as they're afraid to be on their own.
Sure.
So what is the thin line between both? I mean, how?
I mean, I really see that as a symptom of our society and culture. You know, the immediate gratification, as you were saying, you know, the swipe right,
Yes.
swipe left, or FOMO, fear of missing out. The idea that there's always
Better.
a bigger, better model out there. You know, and it depends. You know, some people need to be in a space in a given time where they need connection, but they need sort of enough distance too, right? And so I talk with people about, you know, by doing this, you are creating an environment, you are breeding an environment where you're not going to get so close. And is that what you want? Is that what you need right now? Because what you're telling me is you want a long-term relationship, but what you're doing doesn't
Total opposite,
foster
yeah.
that. You know, or no, I just got it, you know, I was married for 25 years. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I need to date. You know, this is what I'm doing. As long as they're being honest with the people that they're dating, you know, and maintaining their own integrity, then, you know, maybe that's what they need in a moment. But it's important to know what you're doing and why.
Excellent.
So
Now-
much of it is timing as well. You know, where are you in the process? And absolutely, it's so interesting because I have the very big advantage of hearing feedback from both sides of the equation.
Correct.
And sometimes one person's perception completely doesn't match up with the other person's experience. And I then have the opportunity to go back to that person and say, well, that person actually liked you and found you attractive. And they're like, really? It didn't seem that way on the date. They weren't acting like they were really into me. And part of it is really just people don't know. They're insecure, they're anxious, and unless they have that positive reinforcement, they're not really going to want to go forward in that situation. So having the opportunity to be that middle ground and sharing the feedback back and forth has been invaluable. And I know I have couples who are married today where that never would have happened had I not intervened in that way.
So you're basically saying that we all have to be psychologists, able to read into people's mind to know what they're thinking, because you know your body language might say something else with what you're thinking. You might be more reserved, like crossing your arms during a date. That tells the other person that they're afraid of something and they're not really open-minded. So that's basically the biggest challenge that a lot of people are going through right now in the dating scene.
Well, yes, you're right. None of us are mind readers. And we don't necessarily have to be psychologists in order to get the other person, but I always advise people that if you can show some vulnerability on your part, that makes you much more approachable to the other person. And all of a sudden, it's less threatening.
I see.
So a different dynamic does take place when that can happen. But people have to have the self-confidence to be vulnerable. And that's another thing. That love is really about attaching to each other's vulnerabilities, not admiring somebody on the surface.
And I think there can be tremendous anxiety around being vulnerable because there's this idea that somehow that's not attractive or you need to play it cool. And what I remind people of is if the person that you are engaging with is in that space and you're wanting to have a relationship, they're probably not a good fit for you because they're busy sort of with the veneer and you need to hold that. You know, that again, it's that sort of needing to be desired at all costs, even your own, that can get in the way.
And what is the boundary that you have to give to yourself when it comes to not knowing what the other person would accept you to do, like when it comes to calling the next day saying, I enjoyed my time with you. I mean, if, people are busy nowadays, and sometimes you cannot really expect the other person to text immediately right after.
Right.
So this instant gratification that they
Right.
have in their mind, that once they text, they expect two,
Right.
3
Well,
seconds
I
later.
can't tell you the number of times people have, distressed been on my couch saying, I texted him and it took him 30 minutes to text me back, or what, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness,
Just 30?
because it wasn't 30 seconds. And that's something that I talk with people about. You want to have a relationship with somebody who actually isn't sitting around waiting for you to text. Like, this is someone who has a life and is doing things, and in the midst of all of those things, took the time to message you back when he could or she could. And that's meaningful. And if you can't tolerate the waiting, that's something we need to work on.
Okay, patience is a virtue.
Indeed.
Here you go.
It's about communication, really effective communication, and people expressing what they need. So, for example, if there's a scenario where somebody texts, the other person really doesn't like texting, they should say, I'm really not comfortable. I would prefer talking to you on the phone. Is there a time we can talk? And really saying what it is that they want from the other person and what their style and what's most comfortable for them. And a lot of people don't do that. They get caught up in the whole pace of, oh, well, he's texting me, and they get anxious about how much time should I wait to respond back. I believe this tendency and this phenomenon is the death knell of relationships, because people are not communicating in real time anymore, and they're not talking to each other. And there's really no substitute for hearing someone's voice and really connecting in that way. There's a visceral response that takes place when you hear someone's voice on the phone, and certainly in person, that cannot, be duplicated by a text or an email. And it seems like we've gotten away from that. And because, as I said, I deal with a somewhat older population, we're used to talking on the phone, and it's much more comfortable. And I find that it's much more effective for people actually getting together.
Plus, text missed the tone of communication. You cannot really know how the other person is feeling unless if they put caps on the text, then they're angry somehow. But overall, you cannot really decipher exactly what may go through their mind when they respond, or if they're angry, stressed, or whatever it is. So that can actually be another communication barrier that is created.
It's also ripe for projection. So often we read the tone that's based on our anxiety,
True. Reflection, yeah.
Right. Or, this idea, I've had people who get very anxious about this, that he always says this in the morning, and this morning he didn't say this, he only said that. That there's so much anxiety that they're trying to get data where there isn't data, and that can be really destructive. Whereas if you're having a conversation, you can either say, you didn't call me honey this morning, or you sound like you're upset, or, it sounds like you're stressed, maybe, rather than getting some curt text because somebody's feeling obligated to message you because they know you're going to be upset, but they actually don't have time to talk.
Interesting. Now, when it comes to long distance relationship, and I know a lot of people with online, some people can be like in California, in Spain, all around the world. Now, how do you go and recommend them to say, well, look, you could only see this person once every 2-3 months, or for whatever it is? How they could keep a relationship going based on, the frequency of them meeting each other, like once every 3 months? I mean, do you tell them don't waste your time? It depends on how old they are. I mean, what do you recommend on that?
It depends on the person and where they are. For some people, that's safe and comfortable, and it's all they can tolerate, and it's more than they would have if that wasn't an option. For some people, it's again that I really want to have a close relationship, but you keep dating people who are 3,000 miles away. That's kind of self-defeating. What's this about? How much effort is made on each side, whether or not they started long distance. Maybe they started living in the same place and then it went long distance. That's different, right?
Okay.
Like you've had the experience of spending more time together. Part of what can happen with distance is you get snapshots And if you do spend time together, what you get, right, is very concentrated,
Honeymoon
undivided
stage.
attention, right, and that can persist for forever, and then all of a sudden you're in the same place. Wait, you know, and it's like, you want to go out with your friends? You never went out with your, well, that's because they only had
Yes.
48 hours with you, you know, and so you don't get a feel for what the relationship would actually be like. And that can be particularly problematic for people who tend to be reactive if they feel like someone isn't connected enough to them, right? Like they're very sensitive to that, and so then all of a sudden, you know, that's a problem. Again, it really depends on the particular person and the dynamics and what's going on and whether or not. And the other piece is, if there is long distance and there's an agreement that we just have this incredible connection and we really care about each other and we want to be together at some point, do you actually have a workable plan about how that might happen?
Yeah.
Right? And are you in agreement? Because somebody's going to have to move, or both of you are going to have to move. And is that actually feasible? So also talking about the practicalities.
So for a group of the 50 plus, as you mentioned before, Leora, you said that they're more financially secure. They already have gone through divorce, marriage, they already have kids in college, or already like have their own job. What are the most common issue or problem that they go through, the 50 plus or the baby boomers? Do they have like more like problem with different kind of problem that they actually experience?
It depends on the experience that brings them to this process. For example, I have female clients whose husbands were unfaithful.
Okay.
So if I know that as a baseline going into trying to match them with somebody, then I know that in their particular cases, it's really important. Well, it always is important, but it's especially important to have integrity be a major factor in terms of somebody's characteristics that I'm going to introduce them to.
Like trust issues they have
Right,
mostly.
right. And it's understandable why they would have trust issues. And so it's important for me to find someone who's really reliable, who's really trustworthy, who's very monogamous, who doesn't want to date multiple people, and where they can really try and focus and relax into that situation. So it really depends what somebody has been through already. And there's such a variety of experiences that people come to the table. I do my best work with people who have been through some therapy, and there is a level of self-awareness that goes into it, so they can articulate to me what it is to avoid, the things that really were painful and wounding for them in the past, so that this new person is not going to rub salt in those very wounds that people are trying to heal from.
So when you do deal with people that are explaining to you their problems, would you just say, well, maybe I should send you to Dr. Devon King because it's a mental issue more than just a personality issue?
I do work with therapists, absolutely, because if I see a barrier to somebody's success, and as I said, I'm not a therapist, I'm really a coach and advocate, but sometimes some deeper psychological work is really necessary for them to break through some of the obstacles. And I work in collaboration with several therapists who specialize in relationships so that together we can achieve success, and I, with the client's permission, can be in communication with the therapist. So I can tell the therapist, well, I'm considering introducing this person to person A, and here are their qualities. What do you think about that? Would that work for this client?
Oh,
And
interesting. Okay.
it's been very effective.
Excellent. Anyone here in the audience that would like to be able to share any past experience, especially what we've been discussing about? That would be great. Go ahead, please.
So yeah, I just want to share about these three ladies online that I've been dealing with, and one of them actually wanted to talk to me on the phone. So I thought that was great, and after we talked on the phone, and she was very happy to hear my voice, and she said now she can relate my voice to the emails that we've been sending, and so we start talking every night, and so I think it's very important that you get some kind of connection, at least by talking on the phone instead of just texting. We text too, you know, now, and that's basically what I wanted to say. But there was another question I had for you guys, but I just forgot.
It will come to you.
All right, thank you.
I am sure. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I've had some experience in a dating relationship, and I know this hasn't come up yet, and it's a common problem, where the guy is ready for physical intimacy and I'm not. Because sometimes I start off a relationship saying, what's important to me is a friendship. I want to feel someone I can enjoy activities with, someone that I can talk to, I can trust, and that, is just reciprocated. So a few times when I said, well, I'm looking for a friend, I think in some ways, if the guys think, oh, okay, she's not wanting a long-term relationship or she's not wanting intimacy. And it's not necessarily that, it's that I want, the comfort of a relationship, because I do feel like I take intimacy seriously, especially at this stage. And I also think intimacy beforehand puts kind of a veil over you. You either don't see red flags all of a sudden, it sparks up hormones and stuff and feelings that are sometimes false, just because it's a physical relationship and instead of an emotional connection. So sometimes I like to hear from the men about how they view hearing that word friend, as opposed to I'm looking for a lover, which isn't really the thing. You want the whole package, but some things have to come before other things.
Well, when it comes to when a guy hears friends, ultimately they think about platonic. They think about, okay, well, she just want to hang out with someone. Do I really want to waste my time? Especially if the guy is looking for something more long-term. So maybe the friend connotation might not be the best word to use when you're actually expressing yourself as what you're looking for. So ultimately, you want to be able to say, I would prefer to start slowly to get to know you better, to be able to have an idea of what you're looking for, and then afterwards, we can actually think about taking it further. At least for him, he knows there's a vision, there's actually a goal somewhere that is not going to be just platonic or long-term. So it depends who you're talking to on the other side of the spectrum here. So, ultimately, like I said, it depends on what he's looking at as well. And if he wants a long-term relationship, using the word friends, he's just gonna probably go MIA on you.
Okay. And I think that part of what you're saying, having a friendship, trust, all of the things you're looking for are integral parts of having a long-term relationship. So if you can figure out a way to communicate it so that it's not sort of giving that visceral, oh, she doesn't want what I want, but you're clear, then you're actually inviting people who have similar goals to you to engage with you, right? That what you want is someone who wants to have a friendship first, but also has long-term goals. You don't, it sounds like you want a longer-term relationship. You want it all. You just need to move slowly. So you also wouldn't want somebody who just wanted something platonic. So you also, you don't want to push away people, but you also don't want to invite the wrong people either. So then you're developing this friendship thinking that it's, I'm really getting to like this guy. Like I might, fall for him. And he was like, wait, I thought we were just going to be friends. So I think that it goes both ways too.
What I also hear you asking is, how do I know and how do I respond to pressure to become physically intimate with someone before I'm ready? And I think that's a common problem. And one of the approaches that I think helps is really to think of it in terms of, as you said, friendship first, but I believe exclusivity really needs to enter into the picture before physical intimacy really emerges in a healthy way. Because relationships are a continuum. So while it starts with attraction, there has to be a stage at which you're trying to figure it out. And that's the uncertainty stage. And if you pass through the uncertainty stage and you still want to be together, and there's enough there holding you together, then it can move to exclusivity. But there needs to be a foundation of time invested and enough trust to know that, yes, we're really into each other and we'd like this to go forward, but now I can feel safe that you're going to be exclusive with me if we're going to get physical. And I think that gives people the peace of mind that they don't have if they really do it too quickly, or they bypass the uncertainty stage to get physical too quickly because they don't have that foundation.
So clear communication is key. And that
Yeah.
goes for any relationship, any marriages, and even a new relationship that you're actually thinking about. I mean, if you're not clear with your words, then they will not receive the clear end of your intent. So you have to have like a deliberate intent to know what you want. And if he doesn't want what you want, then you move to the next one.
Or if you're being pressured, that's never a good thing.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I guess we are at the end of the seminar. That's all basically the time that we have for today's show. I would like to thank our guest panelists, Leora Hoffman and Dr. Devon King, for coming to our studio today and sharing their valuable thought in the field of dating and relationship. There's so many singles in the DMV area and all over the world, so I'm confident that this show and their valuable tips will help many singles go through the challenges in putting themselves out there, and most importantly, understand the psychology of dating among other singles. So I'd like to thank all of you for coming here today. And also I'd like to thank our audience and our viewers for taking the time of your day, of a very busy schedule, to be able to come here and share your time with us. Now, I would like to also let the audience and the viewers, when it comes to reaching out to our guest panelists, if let's say you want to be able to get further or any other advice, you could actually check on the show. They actually have their contact information, and as well on the credit at the end of the show, you'll be able to see their name and their information. Now, also, if you like to be able to watch other episodes of our seminars, they'll be able to be on YouTube channel, and you'll be able to actually check the YouTube channel. I think it's The Happiness Journey on youtube.com. Now, here are a few concluding words of wisdom. Until you dream, there isn't a mold. Until you speak, there isn't a promise. And until you move, there isn't a path. Yet, you do these simple things every single day, and you will see grand changes in your life. And most importantly, probably finding your soulmate. So if you want to experience great things, start with a small step and take control of your own life. My name is Dr. Dan Amzalag, and have yourself a wonderful day.